Welcome to the Demographics Weatherman video podcast. Scott McDonald brings you the forecast trends you need to know to establish and build your professional practice.
Hello, I'm Scott McDonald, and I am the Demographic Weatherman. Oh, wow, that is so nice. And again, it's in the balconies. I love you little people. Thank you so much. Well, we're going to talk today about the poor. Can you have a practice that is successful serving the lower socioeconomic population within the United States? The answer is obviously yes. Why should you try? Well, because you may notice that the population of the United States is not growing. However, the number of poor people in the United States is. The rich are getting richer, the poor are getting poorer, and there are a lot more poor than there used to be. There's also money to serve the poor. And if we go to the idea that somehow everybody deserves professional services, well then, you probably want to be a part of this process. Now, let's review a map. This is the median household income for the United States. It shows which states have the most money and which have the least. And obviously, we're looking down here at Mississippi, not a place with a lot of income. However, it doesn't mean that everybody in Mississippi is poor. Neither does it mean that locations where a lot of money might reside, say in Maryland and Virginia, are wealthy. There are pockets of poverty and wealth in every state in the Union. Now, let's go to the county map. This shows the United States median household incomes broken out by county. You'll notice some of these counties are going to be very, well, mixed. There's going to be rich, there's going to be poor, there's going to be some counties right next door to each other that are exceptional and some are not so good. Here's the issue. Even though the rich and the poor may live very close together, you're looking at a different population to serve in each area. So we advise you to make sure that you are looking at the most narrow geographic area in evaluating income. Now let's define poverty. There are simple ways to examine the population of the United States in terms of income. If we were to divide them up into fifths, or what we call quintiles, what you'll notice is the top quintile are the rich, but the bottom two quintiles are the ones that are considered poor or below the poverty line. What's a little hard about that is if you look at the poverty line, the people who are in that bottom, it doesn't mean they have no money, and they're not starving to death. They often will receive subsidies in housing and food stamps, living subsidies, rebates on child support. You see, it's those things which make this a very difficult issue to cleanly define. Now, just know this. The poor are not monolithic. They're made up of lots of different lifestyle groups. And knowing that means that if you're going to put a practice in a potential location, you need to know more than simply they don't have money. Why don't they have money? What are their lifestyles and employments like? Now, the second thing I want you to keep in mind is the poor typically expect someone else to pay for their care. I wish I could say that that was a cliche or that it's unfair, but the truth is it's true. However, the people who are poor, and this is the third issue, they are motivated very often by putting, because of programs that exist, put in place by politicians trying to buy votes. It's the way these things are. You see, if they expect that someone else is going to pay for it, they're going to want to know who's going to pay for it, why, and how. These, though, number 4, are the people who have the greatest needs. Their lifestyles are such that very often they don't have the money or the wherewithal, they don't exercise, they don't eat well, they haven't taken good hygiene, care of their hygiene, and because of this, their needs are greater, and believe it or not, the poor are the most in need of expensive care. That's because, as I'll mention again, almost everything that the poor go through is an emergency. They won't seek care unless there's pain or potential death or some really terrible circumstances in their prognosis. That's what makes people come in. So their needs are great. The amount that they need to have paid for is strong, and someone else is going to have to pay for it. That brings me to this point last. You may be a very important person to help navigate the system or to help them learn how to do it. They need help with paperwork. They need help with knowing how to show up and to present themselves in such a way that those people who they want to have pay will. In this way, you're running a 50-50 practice when you're working with the poor. You're trying to help people find services that they need and help facilitate them getting them. Both. Now, there are some facts about treatment that I think we need to review real quickly, and I already mentioned one. They are not inclined, the poor, to use preventive care. As I mentioned, hygiene is often a problem. Diet, exercise, these are not the people who are out there jogging. The poor are rarely joggers. They don't really care for their diets. And that's why, as opposed to being the thinner people, because you'd assume they're poor, they're actually of the heavier class. They have problems with obesity. This makes them truly in need. And it also means that if they're going to have any preventive care, you got to help them. Now, let's talk about this competition ratio, because this is an important fact regarding the poor. You see, the people who serve them need a larger population of patients in order to be successful with the practice. I mean by this, if a dentist, for example, is evaluating an area and you find one dentist per 1,400 people, that may be terrific. It can go down as low as 900 to 1 in some areas. However, with the poor, you may need a population of 3,000 or 4,000 potential patients in order to keep a practice viable, because you have to depend so much on people coming in with no appointment, with no warning, and everything is an emergency. Now, I also want to point out the third thing here are communications issues. The poor have a bigger problem with communicating with people than any other group. And that might be a language barrier. Very often it's a matter of just not understanding how a system works. They're not used to talking to people about their health needs. But there's also anger issues that exist, overall poor communications abilities. So it takes more time and more effort with a lower socioeconomic group to be able to help provide those services. In short, working with the poor is an effort in communications. Fourth thing I want to keep you in mind, look, recall systems for the poor generally don't work. They're not going to respond to telephone calls or emails or texts on their cell phone. They will come in when they feel like coming in, and often because of pain. Now, that being said, it is possible to compensate for this by doing more advertising. In other words, visibility. The poor typically will respond not to direct mail or even radio or television. They often respond to signage. And that's because there's always a relationship in their mind with where the practice is located and where the services are provided. Last, I want you to keep in mind public transportation is a key issue. If you're going to serve the poor, you have to know what bus routes or train schedules there might be. Not only do you have to know the numbers of the trains and the buses and the other transportation sources, you also have to know the transfer hubs. By knowing this, you can facilitate people coming in. And trust me, that may be the most important information that these people are going to want. There are certain factors that are going to contribute to poverty, and you need to keep these in mind. Number one, calamity. There are things that happen to people that are just, frankly, terrible things. Things happen. There may be a hurricane, an earthquake. We certainly know that it will happen on a big scale. You hear it on the news. But there's also personal calamities that happen. They may lose the breadwinner, may become ill, may die. These kinds of calamities are terrible, and we have to acknowledge them. But calamities are generally recovered from by most people pretty well. That may sound rather cavalier, but it's true. Now, one of the other factors that we've got is the lack of education. When you do not have good education, you haven't graduated from school, it's going to severely limit your job opportunities. The same thing is true of any kind of training program that you should be going through. Lack of education will be one of those things that will tend to predict poverty. It's not absolute. However, it is a factor that we have to take into account. Sociologists tell us that this third item, divorce, is one of the most profound reasons why people become poor almost overnight. It affects both parties in a divorce situation. When there are children present in the home, it exacerbates that problem tremendously. But if we look at divorce, lack of education, and calamity, we tend to classify them then in this fourth category, which is circumstantial poverty. People who have circumstantial poverty generally recover. Now, it may take years for it to happen, but it is inevitable almost that people, an average person, can overcome it. Remarriages occur. People do get training programs. There are things that happen, help from outside for calamities, but also just the human nature of wanting to survive and surpass it. If you want to be successful in a poor area, you look for patients who fall within this category, who have circumstantial poverty. It's as though you are making an investment in the population in your area. But there's another kind of poverty, and we call that poverty cultural poverty. You as a professional have to be very careful you are not attracting people who have chronic cultural poverty. These are people who are abusing drugs, are involved in the criminal class, people who are in alcohol addiction. Because you see, no matter what you do, you may be able to treat a little bit by providing some sort of a salve of care, but you're not going to change the people. They also tend to put you and your staff and your facility in danger. That is why I recommend you take a very serious look at the psychography of your area to determine how much of the poverty is caused by circumstantial issues and how much of it is cultural. We've seen, for instance, in Pennsylvania and Michigan, terrible calamities in the employment base. However, these areas have tended to recover over time. Is it a problem that in Maine and Massachusetts the fishing industry is having problems? It's absolutely a problem. But it isn't necessarily permanent because those people will either move or find other things to do. Cultural poverty doesn't allow for that. So I recommend great care. Now, where is poverty? Where is it? Well, let me just put this to bed. You know that poverty is going to exist in every state, in every county to one degree or another. You know that the rich and poor can live very close together, particularly in urban areas. You'll notice, by the way, that in states like Wyoming or North Dakota, there isn't a lot of diversity. Those people are more homogeneous, and that's because the population density is so low. Low population density allows for homogeneity. However, in urban areas, even one block may make a big difference in the poverty rates. So let's look at this. This is a map of the states that shows the percentage of people in poverty. It also shows, by the way, the places that you can practice that tend to be less expensive. That's a good thing for you, because even though you may not be making as much money, at least in terms of figures coming in, you can keep more profit. So I'm not suggesting that just because there's a lot of poverty that you can't practice there successfully. Quite the opposite can be true. Now, this map shows the poverty by county in the United States. It's an interesting statistic because, you see, it shows that there is a body of people by county that may need your services. But as I said before, poverty is not monolithic. Some kinds of poverty and some people who live in some neighborhoods may be very different from others. The big thing they have in common is they have no money. The question is why and how long that condition is going to last. Now, we also want to look at this. It's a weird little thing. This is what they call the continental poverty divide. Do you see how it kind of goes down toward the south? There is an idea that somehow it is bad to practice in that region on the south side. But remember, this is where almost all the new job growth in the United States is going on. These are the places that you can afford to set up a practice and get loans. I am not looking at that continental divide as a negative. It's more of an indication, if I want to set up a practice, can I make it go north of that line, or should I be considering south of that line instead? Now here's a great one. This is the percent change in the poverty rate. As you can probably imagine, poverty is not a static thing. It changes, goes up and goes down. Ironically, those places in the United States that have the highest incomes are often the oldest places in the United States. What we're looking for, particularly when it comes to changes, is how many children there are in the area. The vibrancy of growth of a population based upon birth rate may suggest these places have a low per capita income. But is that necessarily the death knell to a practice? And I suggest it is not. Now, this map shows the percent change in the suburban poverty rate. Now, a lot of people get this idea that all poverty exists in urban areas. And there's a lot of it. No, absolutely. But you see, suburbs also have a tremendous amount of poverty. And particularly when we look at what happened in 2008 with the start of the Great Recession, property values went down and people were forced into a very bad situation. A lot of times their net worth was wiped out in the stock market. Now, does that mean that these people can't recover? Well, look, this is showing where things are in the suburban areas. And on this one, it shows the pockets of rural poverty rates. The problem with having a practice in a poverty area that is rural is there is not much synergy within a population. In short, it's harder to serve a large geographic area of poor people. Now, I need to say something kind of in conclusion about the poor, so hang on there with me for a second. A lot of people talk about corporate practices. Corporate practices are designed to serve large groups of people, particularly in urban areas, but even large suburban areas, that are poor. They're set up because they have lots of treatment options and also payment options. When you see that's the case, a corporate practice makes a lot of sense. On the other hand, if you're thinking about serving the affluent, the rich, corporate practice just won't work very well. Cost efficiencies always go up with corporate practices when there is a significant population, especially a population who are poor. Doctors, I know you went into practice primarily so you can serve people. Yet there are a lot of other ways to make big money. But if you genuinely want to do that, finding a location where there's genuine demand for your services makes a lot of sense. And I hope you will consider creative thinking about where those sites might be. Dr. Demographics provides the Best Sites Report, which helps you identify the places throughout the United States in the areas you want to go to that will show where your likelihood of success will be greatest. Our job is to help you find what you're looking for and to evaluate specific sites for startup or for practice purchase that will make sense for you. Our job is to give you the data that you need and analysis that will help you get there. Please visit us at drdemographics.com or give us a call at 1-800-424-6222. Don't forget our audio podcast is also available free and is available on iTunes as well as on our website. If we can answer any questions, please write and we'll be happy to help you. Oh, and by the way, if you ever want the Weatherman to come out and do a forecast for your study club or society, give us a call. We'll be happy to show up. And thanks again for watching.